we're talking about mental health with regard to performance, and performance in the sense of I'm someone that has to carry responsibility, probably at a number of different levels, but it's the weight of that and handling that, my mental health. And so, Anna, and a Loback, so what's your role, so that everyone gets your role in perspective?
Sure. I'm a business psychologist. I'm an executive coach, and I'm also the managing partner of a global leadership development consultancy here in the UK called Turning Point Leadership. Okay,
so all right, I sort of get the executive coach thing, which is really just an expensive psychologist that works with teams. All of that. So that's an interesting term, business psychologist. What's that?
Well, we essentially bring psychology and science in particular to the world of work. So using what we know and what we understand from the study of psychology, neuroscience, etc., into helping leaders optimize their own performance and the performance of their people, helping organizations create the best conditions and the best environment to get the best out of people, basically.
Okay, all right. So, so some of the clients, I know a pretty impressive group of clients that you work with. So who are some of those, just to give us perspective?
Yeah, I get to work with some of the most incredible organizations in the world, actually. I work a lot with global companies, such as L'Oreal, for example, the largest beauty company in the world. I've trained and coached, in fact, managers, hundreds of managers, and I work directly with the board and the exco. I work with LVMH, for example, a lot as well. It's the largest luxury goods company in the world as well. They own Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy and literally dozens and dozens of luxury brands like Christian Dior, Givenchy, Fendi, etc., etc., etc. I work in the financial industry as well a lot. I happen to also work with the largest bank in the world, BNP Paribas, and a few others, and governments as well, and even the United Nations. So it's pretty incredible.
Oh wow, that's pretty broad.
Yes,
broad.
Completely.
Oh, yeah, well done. That's pretty impressive. So all right, so we're talking about mental well-being, mental health. So one of the things that, so if I asked you this question, how do I get perspective? Because I think sometimes when you're under a whole lot of pressure and the weight of things, one of the first things, maybe not the first, but it certainly goes fairly quickly, perspective, losing perspective, and there's, instead of obstacles being opportunities, obstacles become things of great, they carry an incredible weight that you can feel almost paralyzed. So how do I get perspective?
Yeah, that's such a great question. How do you keep perspective? That's a great question.
Get it back, whichever one's applicable. Do you find that's a common thing where people just, under the weight or the pressure and all of that we've been talking about in other conversations, perspective can just so easily just go, I've lost perspective. Is that a common thing?
Yes, it is. Very common. And that's okay. Yes,
first of all, feel better. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. It's common and it's normal, and it's actually a consequence of how we are wired, essentially. Our brain has this incredible ability to zoom into something and to focus on things, which is great in many aspects. That enables excellent performance in lots of different areas, etc. Our ability to focus on something is really incredible, but on the other hand, it can backfire, and it can also mean that we can quite easily lose the sense of perspective, that there are always different sides to things and to people and to situations, and we also tend to create...
I'm fascinated on this, right? So I know, so we're talking, you do what you do from a professional level as a psychologist, but I would come at things from a biblical perspective. And it's amazing how much, from a biblical perspective, on things is get your perspective right, get your thinking right, get how you see things right. It's amazing, hey? Just I'm fascinated how all of this works.
Yeah, and how these things are linked as well, because one of my favorite verses in the Bible is actually Romans 12 verse 2, where it talks about that concept of renewing your mind. And that idea of renewing your mind always stayed with me. And I remember in recent years, in the last decade or so, when the discoveries around neuroplasticity and this ability that the brain has to literally renew itself and to literally continue to grow and expand and evolve, and how grey matter actually always grows and expands, because you can always learn and you can always change your mindset. Something that the Bible has said for so many years,
Yeah.
and actually neuroscience is now showing how, practically speaking, that really does happen.
Because I think for a lot of people, because you can feel trapped
Yeah,
in this. Well, this is just how it is, and you hear people, well, this is just how I am, and there's almost like this fatalism, and it's void of any hope that anything can be different, and all I have to do is learn how to cope with present, because nothing's going to change. That's my. Whereas what you're talking about is you know what, I can actually, things can be different to what is currently ruling me. Are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not only things can be different, but you can completely, 100%, you can change your mindset. And once you change your mindset and what you focus on, you actually change your experience of reality.
Can I ask the obvious? What's a mindset?
Mindset is your pattern of thinking. It's your way of thinking about yourself, about others, about the world. And that pattern of thinking, sometimes people think with that fatalist view that you were describing, that it's very stuck in its ways, and actually you can completely shift it. It all depends on what you focus on. And again, going back to your question, how do I get perspective, or how do I gain perspective or regain, etc.? There are a couple of things there. First of all, it's the mechanisms involved with attention and focus, and understanding how that works, and how you can shift focus away from something and literally change your experience of reality. That is something that I think most people don't know, but they really need to understand. And the second thing is understanding the biases that you have in your brain, what we call cognitive biases. They are mechanisms. They're shortcuts that your brain creates to help you understand
like our
reality.
natural tendency towards negativity or something.
For example, we do have a natural tendency towards negativity. We call that a negativity bias. Well, evolutionary psychologists would argue that the negativity bias exists for self-defense reasons. You couldn't afford to ignore a real threat like a bear coming at you to eat you alive, but you could afford to ignore the taste of a certain fruit or something like that. And probably for those types of reasons, our brains have evolved to process negative stimuli with a lot more intensity and brain energy than we process positive stimuli. And again, for all sorts of reasons that we don't have time to go into. Yeah. But the reality is that there is a huge body of research showing that our brain processes the negatives in a very different way from the positives.
Okay, so a question on this, right? So if just say if I'm someone who being anxious about things is almost a natural progression on things, perhaps, or I might go, I'm prone to being anxious. Mm-hmm. Yet I see myself as someone who is always positive and not negative. How does that correlate?
How does one correlate with the other?
Yeah.
Well, it can actually, and when I talk about negativity bias, for instance, I'm not necessarily talking about optimism or pessimism.
Well, that's the point I was trying to make, because I think, right. So unpack that a little bit.
100%. So they are not the same thing. You can be someone with a natural disposition towards optimism, or with a natural disposition to seeing the bright side of life and the glass half full, and still have the negativity bias. So they are two different things. The negativity bias, what we talk about here is literally how your brain processes information and stimuli, and the fact that you do use a lot more energy when it comes to negative stimuli than you do for the positives. And there's a bunch of...
Yeah, so because I've got, I just want to park here for a little bit. Right?
Yeah.
So I would, as a person, say, personally, I'm just going personally, if I looked at that glass, I'd go, it's half full. But right, I said actually the wrong thing, because my tendency is to go, or it used to be, to say that the glass is half empty.
Yeah.
And somehow, my first response, as I said, was, it's half full.
Yeah.
Right? So that's optimism versus pessimism, is that what we're talking about?
Not necessarily.
Right.
It's actually focus. It's what you choose to focus on.
Okay,
when you observe that, even though your first reaction could still be it's half empty, but I'm not talking about your initial reaction. I'm talking about what you do with that.
Okay, so that's where, because then I would say, like maybe I see myself incorrect, but anxiety is not something that I struggle with, right? However, because now whether is that because I'm okay, I'm a fatalist, because it's whatever comes, whatever happens, just whatever happens, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, that's half empty. Is that, am I weird, or am I just because
You're
sometimes
not weird.
No, because the two don't necessarily go together.
No.
Right, that's what you're saying.
Absolutely,
okay, right.
Absolutely. They really don't. And they are, one thing is how your brain processes information, stimuli, etc. And the other thing is what you choose to focus on with everything that you see. Now, what's interesting about the focus element is that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that what you focus on is literally what you experience. So it's almost like if you set your brain to target the right things, you seem to experience that reality literally. Now, what's also true about this is that you literally miss what you're not focusing on. Wow. So once you choose to focus on something, that's actually what your brain will look for. It will scan the world around you looking for that thing that you choose to focus on. And that means that it will eliminate everything else.
So if you're looking for trouble, you'll find it.
Exactly.
Wow.
And if you're looking for the negatives, for instance, going back to the negativity bias, the more you focus on the negatives in your workplace, your partner, your team, etc., the more you focus on that, the more you will see that, the more you will find that, and your brain will eliminate everything else, because it's that ability to zoom into something and to focus on something that keeps you alive and keeps you going.
So that's the whole, so come back to that, so that's perspective.
Yeah,
that's
perspective.
So my whole, so if I'm looking for the negative, right, and I've let that run somehow, all I'm going to do is find the negative, and that's now my, because is that where that term perspective is as reality?
Exactly. That's where it becomes reality.
Right.
And what's interesting about this is that there's a whole body of research looking into this, by the way, and looking at the power of focus and focused attention. It's how you can actually target your brain to focus on something, and being very aware that you will, if you do that, you will probably miss out on all the other things that you're not focusing on, and that's why you need to put the right things in place to make sure that you don't lose perspective.
Okay, so how do I dial it back if I've gone down that place, or because later on, like obviously, second question would be, this then impacts all my decisions, right? But how do I, before I get into how does it impact, because what I see is what I base my decisions on. I've lost perspective, wrong perspective, wrong decisions.
Exactly.
Right? So how do I dial things back, or how do I set myself up so I don't get there?
So one of the things that we can do is, once we acknowledge that our brain has this incredible ability to zoom into things and therefore miss out on what you're not looking for, basically, You can also understand that you can actually set your brain's spam filters, if you like, to eliminate the stimuli that you want to eliminate, and so that you're getting the right things into your brain, because you need to make sure that you experience reality in a way that is productive for you, that is positive for you, that will enable you to experience what we call healthy functioning.
Right.
And this is very important. What research shows is that once you channel your mental energy into the positives and the strengths, your own and those of others, of the circumstances, etc., once you're able to channel your attention and your focus into the positives, you are actually setting your brain up for not only normal functioning but optimal functioning. Essentially, in other words, what I mean is that there is this positive advantage in your brain that is almost a success factor, not just and it really breaks the concept that people have that, you know, once I get something, I will be happy. If I get the house, I'll feel happier. If I get the job, that's when I'll feel happier. And actually what I'm saying is research shows that it's the other way around.
So,
when your brain
so
is
then
positive,
how much of this is linked then, because we're talking about performance.
Yeah.
Like, throwaway statement, but incredibly true. I've got to learn how to enjoy the journey, not just not the end result. Is this linked? Because I think for a lot of, if we're talking about performance and going well, doing well, being well, feeling well, it's all in the accomplishment. Whereas, so am I hearing that you're saying that it's I can get into enjoying the journey here, which is good for my...
Yes, and not only it's good for you, but it will actually give you a significant competitive advantage. In fact, there's some recent research from Harvard that says that the brain at positive is 31% more productive than the brain at its neutral or negative state.
Wow.
Developing this ability to have a more positive, what we call a positive mindset, that has, you know, that you set your filters to catch the positive stimuli around you and even internally, will set you apart from the competition, from everyone else.
Okay.
It's not only about being healthy and functioning normally, but it's actually about more than that. It's about optimal performance.
Okay, help me set the filters.
How do you do it?
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Practically
yeah.
speaking, how do you do it?
Yeah.
So again, focus, attention is something that actually you can control. You are in control of what you focus on. You're not in control of the stimuli that you have around you, and you're not always in control of how you automatically respond to them, but you are 100% in control of what you choose to focus on. And that really is the secret. I think there are a couple of techniques as well that we normally would give to people. I don't know if we're at that stage of the conversation yet or not, but there are some really practical things.
I think I'm at that point.
Great. So there are some practical things that we can do.
I think this is good.
One of the things that really helps you to focus is actually questions. The power of questions to focus the brain is incredible, because your brain has been wired to zoom into the answer to any question that you ask yourself.
Well, I can remember once you said your brain is wired to find an answer to the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, not wired. Your brain's geared. The way it works is
exactly.
It's seeking an answer to the question.
Automatically, it does that.
Yeah.
So the questions that you're asking yourself are absolutely essential. The questions, if you take this to the context of an organization or the role that you might have with others, the questions that you're asking the people around you are absolutely essential to get everyone focused on what it is that you want to get people focused on. If we think about the positive mindset, and because of all the benefits that it has, and all the theory and research and evidence that we see today to suggest that not only it leads to optimal performance, but also to physical health as well, actually. There's some fascinating research from Dr. Barbara Fredrickson into the impact of positive thoughts and positive feelings and emotions not only in terms of performance in the brain, but also in terms of physical and emotional well-being.
So what you're saying is, all right, so it's all feeling and thinking, but to get my feeling and thinking on track, it's all got to do with the questions I'm asking.
Exactly,
right.
Exactly. So questions are absolutely central to channel your attention and your focus into what it is that you want to be focused on. The other thing that, interestingly enough, is essential for focus and the power of what we call directed mental force, which is focusing on something, is gratitude. And the value of experiencing and processing gratitude in all of this that we're talking about is huge. There's an interesting piece of research conducted by Professor Martin Seligman.
There's also a scripture that says, above all, give thanks and everything.
Of course there is.
Yeah, anyway, back to the psychologist.
Yeah, I know. But Professor Martin Seligman, who was he's considered the father of positive psychology, which is in fact the field of science and psychology that looks into what we're talking about, the study of optimal functioning and all things positive in terms of how human beings function, and including the brain, etc. And Professor Martin Seligman, who was because
I think it's important just to quantify whatever. When we're talking about psychology, we're just talking about the science of how the brain works.
Yeah,
that's the context of our conversation.
Exactly, it's the science of human behavior, etc. Yeah. Absolutely. And back to Seligman. So Seligman, who used to be the president of the American Psychological Association at one point, and he was the first one to introduce this field of study. And he conducted several very significant research studies looking into this. And one of them involved gratitude, and looking at the impact of gratitude in the human brain and in how people feel about themselves, about others, etc.
Define for me when you say gratitude, because I think in today's world, words have got so many meanings because people love to contextualize the word to give meaning to it. So when you're using the term gratitude...
So gratitude is a reflection process that involves acknowledging reality and your experience, and feeling grateful for that experience. So it's really looking, it's your brain intentionally scanning the world around you, looking for things to be grateful for.
So it's not necessarily saying everything has to be perfect.
No.
And I'm grateful for everything.
No.
It's looking for something
absolutely
to be grateful about.
That's what it is. It's scanning the world around you to look for things, and yourself as well, to look for specific things to feel grateful for. Yep. And in this particular study that I want to reference, he did this exercise, this experiment, in fact, called 3 Good Things. It was really simple, and it sounds very fluffy, but actually it was with a lot of research behind it. And he conducted this longitudinal study, and he observed this group of people that all they had to do was every day they needed to find 3 good things, 3 things to be grateful for. And there were some rules about this. The things needed to be different things every day. They needed to be specific. It couldn't just be random, I'm grateful because I'm alive. The sun's shining. No, it needed to be very specific. And
that's important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because it's just generalizations that really, all right.
That doesn't do anything for you. Yeah. But it's about focusing on specific things, and you needed to share that with others. So again, the sort of the power of social connection and how important it was for the brain to anchor the learning and to shift the mindset. You really need to share it with other people as well. So you need to process it with others. So and what this study revealed was that after a certain period of time doing this exercise, people started shifting their mindset. And you set your brain filters to literally look for good things around you, inside of you. And really, gratitude is one of the most powerful tools to shift your mindset and to develop a more positive mindset. That really does it.
On a side note.
And anyone can do this, right? It's so simple.
I was just thinking, like, this is a completely off grid. But even the whole concept of when people get offended and get bitter, the antidote or the medicine for bitterness is gratefulness.
Absolutely.
Instead of having a biting hostility about everything, you're counteracting that with having a gratefulness for things.
Yes, and it's better for you essentially. It's not as a result it'll be better for the other person as well. Yeah. But it's fundamentally better for you to focus, to be intentional about focusing on the good thing, wherever that is. But really, the more you do that, the more you focus on the positives and finding the positives versus just the deficit, the more you become better able to do that. And that's how you shift your mindset.
Yeah, so that shift, so now if I'm in a position, right, and I go, right, I've just lost perspective. Lost all perspective. I guess firstly I've got to be aware I've just lost perspective.
Yeah.
Right? And now I'm aware I've lost it. To shift things, I've got to start looking for things to be grateful about, to start shifting. Hey, instead of going, I'm finding what I'm negative about.
Yeah.
I'm now starting to see everything that's good about what I'm a part of, instead of everything that's negative about what I'm a part of, and my whole perspective begins to shift.
Yeah, it really does. And anyone could do that in any situation that you're in, whatever the situation is. You can look at something and think, what's the opportunity here for me? Who can help me with this? Who can I partner with? Who can I collaborate? Who's been through this? Or when was the last time that I was in this situation? What happened there? Did I break? Did I die? No. So it's almost, where's the learning here for me? What did I learn from this situation? There's another tip actually to answer your question. Again, super practical, super simple. 3 questions, again, the power of questions to focus your brain on something and shift and gain perspective. What, so what, now what? Really simple. It's based on the Kolb reflective learning cycle, but a simplified version of that model that can really help people. Anyone can do this in any situation. What is really happening here? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What are other people seeing? What are other people saying about this? What really is happening? What? So what? What are the consequences? What is the impact for me, for others? You're really breaking a problem down into small component parts. And when you do that, you help your brain deal with that reality. That's what you're doing.
Because that's what I find. If you can help, like people go, I've got a problem. Well, actually, it's really not a problem. It's just a whole lot of little problems in comparison that are making this a problem. And break it down, deal with each. That's what. Okay.
Exactly. It's and using a simple model like this can help you do that. What's happening? So what? What are the implications? What's the impact? Now what? What will be different because of what's happened? What have I learned? How will I deal with this in the future? And what you're doing with that is you're taking your brain through the process of actually. When you're in the problem, everything feels very big, but actually you're breaking it apart into smaller chunks, which enables your brain to feel more in control. If instead of a big lump of things, you actually have different things that you can deal with, one thing at a time. And then you're slowly taking your brain through that, and eventually you start taking your brain towards the future thinking. Now what? What will be different because of this? So it's the learning piece. You're bringing in, it's reflective practice basically. And this really, really can help. And again, anyone can do this. It's a simple thing for you to do in any situation that you go through.
All right. So if we come on, before I said, okay, so ultimately I've lost perspective on things. I've got to regain perspective, all of that. So how does all of this affect our decision-making ability, right? So, because if you're carrying weight of responsibility and things like that, sometimes it's almost like you can hit this. I guess the term is I feel paralyzed. I just don't want to make another decision, or I can't. Probably, I don't know about I don't want. I know when we go on family holidays, I just go, I'm not making any of the decisions, I'm just paying the bills. You guys make all the decisions, I'll just pay the bills because I want to break from decisions.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to say I'm going to have a break from decisions. It's another thing to go, I'm paralyzed. I can't make decisions.
Yeah.
Is that a true thing that people experience?
That's a real thing. It has a name. It's called the paradox of choice. And you can actually become paralyzed when you feel like you have too many choices, too many decisions to make. Now, what's interesting about how
that's just not about the type of ice cream. We're not talking about that.
No. But it's really when all the different decisions of life come together and pile up, and you really
to someone who's carrying responsibility.
Exactly.
Okay,
and it can really paralyze people.
Is that an exit thing? Do people go?
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like I'm out. I can't handle this.
Yeah.
Can't handle anymore.
Yeah.
And people take an exit. So the answer is not to exit.
No.
The answer is how do I get back into a place in my own head?
Yeah.
Right? Where I see exit as the answer. How do I get back? Exit's not the answer, but I've got to.
Yeah.
So help me understand that.
It's important to understand how the brain works when it comes to decision making, and the processes that are involved in the thinking process. Really, I'm talking about the real. I would describe it as cognitive machinery that is involved in decision making. And actually, we have two systems of thinking when it comes to making decisions. One of them is fast, it's intuitive, it's automatic, it's easy, it's what we call system one. And the other one is slow, it's effortful, it's difficult, it feels difficult, and it's called system two. System one, the automatic one, the intuitive one, the fast one, is all about intuition, and it uses associative memory to make very fast automatic connections in your brain. It's also the realm of biases, cognitive biases, like the ones that I was talking about earlier, and others, like all sorts of shortcuts in your brain, gender bias, all sorts of cognitive biases that fall under the system one type of thinking. And really what that is doing for you, it's trying to help you. Your brain creates these shortcuts to help you process and deal with the world in a quicker and easier way. And the other type of thinking, the slow one, the difficult one, that's the world of logic. And most of my clients, for instance, think when I ask them the question, how do you make decisions? 90% of my clients say to me when I ask them the question that they make decisions based on logic. But in fact, research shows that 95% of the decisions that we make them in system one, the intuitive, the automatic, the emotional, rather than system two, logic. And if you think about it, from all the thousands of micro decisions that you have to make during a normal day, even from, where do you cross the road to, where do you sit on the tube, to the big decisions that you need to make. When you think about it, if you see an angry face in front of you, you very quickly make connections about, you interpret that as anger. You read into someone's emotions. You can quickly read into, what that person's going to do next. Based on what you see there. Or if I say to you, think of France, very quickly you'll come up with a word like Paris or cheese or wine or whatever it is. So associative memory, intuition, boom, that was easy. You didn't have to. People would say to me, I didn't have to think to come up with that. Yeah. But if I ask you to tell me how much is 17 times 24, it probably feels difficult. You roll your eyes, you think, oh, I need a calculator, or I need a pen and paper. So logic is full of effort, and it requires a process. System two is the process type of thinking. Now, the secret to making good choices, essentially, is first of all understanding how these systems work, knowing that your immediate reaction might not necessarily be the best one, but at the same time, I think more importantly, what most people would say this and would say, oh yeah, so the secret is not to operate in system 1 and pause and go to system 2 and use logic. Well, actually, I would argue that the best thing to do is actually to work with what you have, to understand how your system 1 functions and works, and to use the power of focus to make sure that you're setting your automatic filters to the right things, so that fundamentally, and actually the research would indicate that the most successful leaders are the ones that actually they always say to you that they make decisions based on gut feeling almost. That's right, because you can actually educate your gut, your intuition, to make the right choices.
Because I think that's important, isn't it? That you can, what you just said, you can, because I know some very intuitive leaders, but I think sometimes the way people hear it is it all just comes natural. Whereas I know them well enough to know that it's not just comes natural. They put a lot of thought.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of processing into, call it life, so that when this intuitive thing just comes out, it's actually been well birthed.
Exactly. And there's a lot of work that goes into setting all that machinery so that your intuition is actually set on the right things, really. But it is something that you need to educate that system 1. And you can do it. And how do you do it? It's the stuff that we were talking about earlier. It's the understanding the power of focus. And knowing how every single day you can start shifting your mindset so that you can set your filters onto certain things that you really want to be focused on, and that's how you do it. And you use questions, you use attention management to make sure that you're, managing, paying attention to the right things. So essentially it's using all the different things that we were talking about earlier, like the power of questions and making sure that you're asking the right questions to channel your attention into things. It's attention management, for instance. It's gratitude. It's all the other stuff that you can use as tools to educate your system 1, basically. Okay,
so if I was, because I think, as you know, we use the term leaders, which is it's either a very broad term or a very narrow term. There's this intuitive thing that you've got to develop. It's not just innate. Yeah. Because I think for a lot of people, they'll see someone that's intuitive and go, "Oh, I've got no hope." Whereas what you're saying is you can develop the intuitive aspect, if you like.
Absolutely, you can learn it like you can learn anything else.
And then there's the, but then there's your logic. If I'm here, and your logic is well that you've got your evidence, perhaps. So I've got enough. Because I find myself, I'm intrigued with this sort of stuff, right? So I find myself, I think I'm seeing something here. I don't know if I've got a gut feeling that something's not right, or there's something happening, or something. So then I'll find myself looking for evidence. Now, I guess the challenge is am I going to find something I'm looking for?
Exactly.
Or you're saying if I ask enough questions, rather than just go looking for it.
Exactly.
Because if I just go looking for it, I'll find it.
You will.
And it might not be right.
You will.
But if I ask enough questions, I'll find out if what I'm thinking is right, not what I'm necessarily looking for.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because if you only do the former, which is, you have a gut feeling about something, you have an instinct, you set out to look for that. What you're doing with that is you've already primed your brain to find that thing. Whereas what you need to do is actually you need to be asking questions and making sure that you're broadening your scope of thinking and seeing and perceiving.
Because my negative bias is almost conclusive.
Exactly.
Conclusive that then will create. I'll just find everything I need to create it. Versus asking questions is not conclusive. I'm looking for information. All right. So if I'm going to focus on because it can actually drag you down.
Yeah.
If I'm going to focus on my mental well-being, it's all about, it really comes down to focusing on the right things.
Yeah.
It's going to help me with my decisions, shape the right mindset, going to keep me in order. You're pretty good at what you're doing.
Thank you.
This is awesome. Thanks, eh?
Oh, thank you.